No reason but God. The men had conspired long into the night. Daniel was a thorn in their side, and they would do whatever it took to get rid of him. God's favor for him was clear. The king was enamored with him. And if they didn't make a move, it would be too late. The kingdom would be handed over to a foreigner. This wasn't a game. Daniel's political enemies were real, and they were plotting to kill him. When I heard the story of Daniel in the past, I imagined a fair-haired young man, maybe in his early 20s. As I recall, the flannel graph characters used during Sunday school lessons made him look tanned and trim, bright-eyed and strong. You know, the dateable kind of guy. I certainly did not picture that. At the point in Daniel's life when he was thrown into the lion's den, he would have been in his 80s. The reality is that his hair, if he had any at all, would have been silver, his skin covered in age spots and his face lined with years. By the time we reach the account in Daniel 6, Daniel has served a foreign empire in a key leadership position for about 70 years. He had been taken from his home preceding the fall of Jerusalem as a bright young teenager with his whole life ahead of him. He was a Jew of noble birth, full of promise, who was ripped from the only home he had known and carried to the palace of Nebuchadnezzar. The Babylonians had swept through Israel, imposing the consequence of Israel's disobedience to God. Jerusalem's noble youth had been carried off to be indoctrinated in the way of the Babylonians. Upon arrival, the kids were given new names in an effort to strip away their heritage, the memory of their homeland, and the God they had worshipped. Their first true test looked more like a good buffet spread, with delicious food and wine, than a dangerous first step toward moral decline. To the outsider, it would certainly not be seen as a spiritual barometer for how these boys' faith would fare in a foreign, secular land. But that's exactly how the first chapter of the book of Daniel describes these kids' first days in Babylon. Daniel, surrounded by other Jewish young men, made a decision that the God of his youth in Jerusalem was still his master in Babylon, and that the Lord's guidelines for living were still to be obeyed. Daniel, resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. Daniel chapter 1, verses 8 through 9. This small choice as a teen set a trajectory of obedience and integrity that would define Daniel for the rest of his life. Not only did he choose obedience to God, but God rewarded that obedience with his favor and poured his blessing upon him. When Daniel's time came to stand before the king of Babylon, he and his 3 close friends were found to be 10 times wiser than the wisest men in the king's service. Verse 20. Integrity leads to blessing. In moments when no one else would make the choice to obey, when it may not even seem wise or could lead to lasting negative consequences, people with integrity believe that God knows what he is doing when he sets boundaries on our lives. Integrity says, God's way is the best way, come what may. And it believes that there will be a reward for their hidden choices of obedience when no one else cares or applauds. While the diet selection may have been Daniel's inaugural test, it certainly would not be his last. He was appointed as a key advisor to King Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel, a foreigner, was brought into a sacred place of trust in the kingdom of Babylon, in service to a king who had separated Daniel from his family and could very well have orchestrated their deaths. But Daniel was not a man of vengeance. He was a man of prudence and discretion. Daniel chapter 2, verse 14. A man of prayer, verse 18. And a man of humility, verse 30. Over the years of King Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Daniel would faithfully point this pagan king to God Most High, speak truth when it could cost him his life, and even act with compassion when he had to prophesy coming judgment. At the end of King Nebuchadnezzar's life, Belshazzar succeeded him as king of Babylon. Daniel, the respected and trusted advisor, must have moved largely into retirement. Maybe his advice seemed old-fashioned and his wisdom too restrictive. The young king was wild and reckless, certainly irreverent. And during one wild party, he ordered the holy vessels from Jerusalem's temple to be used for his wine and revelry. But the party came to a screeching halt when a hand was seen writing on the wall inside the palace, its words unintelligible to all the partygoers. Terror struck the heart of Belshazzar, and the queen calmly reassured him that there was a good man who could surely help. There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In the time of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods.